Melchizedek, or the Secret Doctrine of the Bible, by J.C. Grumbine, published in 1919. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. Lecture 4, The Christ, Psychology, and Christian Mysticism. The Christ psychology and Christian mysticism. It may here be asked, what was and is the purpose of the secret doctrine, which endured through ages, perpetuated by prophets, and is communicated to us in the silence? Pythagoras, it is said, enjoined 6 years of silence on his disciples. To be a mystic, one must learn how to seal eyes, ears, and lips to what is seen, heard, and spoken. When such silence is attained, one learns how to commune with God, and by the spiritual order of Melchizedek. The Holy Spirit, indefinable to vulgar intelligences, is an ever-present spirit of truth, indwelling in all spiritually minded and illuminated souls, by which truth is revealed concerning spiritual realities. The presence of God could not approach nearer to us than does the Holy Spirit of truth. There is, however, a divine technique which is concealed and revealed in the Bible, called the Christ psychology, which Jesus taught in the parable of the 5 talents and the 5 wise virgins, and which Paul hinted at in Corinthians 11, verse 15. Obscure and veiled as their textual meanings are, the secret doctrine expounds their hidden meaning in unmistakable clearness. Divinity central in the soul can illuminate the mind and life, enlighten the senses, add a divine range to sight and hearing, and so permeate the soul with its radiant and pure light as to transform lo, the human, at once into lo, the God. This is to be accepted not only theoretically, but can be spiritually demonstrated. Biblical and secular credentials can be cited in proof of this. Religions among all the nations of the world articulate one central fact, that is, life is essentially spirit and divine. It is not born of matter, although associated with it. It is eternal, and therefore the soul is immortal. This is the ever-recurring theme of pure Christianity. I am the resurrection and the life, to prove one's divinity and make it a conscious, helpful principle of one's life. This is the supreme end of religion. All of its prophets declared this message. The martyrs died for it, and yet today a false metaphysics and theology, advocated in part by the Christian Church, has made the spiritual fact of the survival of the personality after death and the prosperity, wealth, and their opposites are largely matters of our desires. Labor and ingenuity and the scriptural justification of the prosperity of the righteous is in the fact that they employ righteous business methods to obtain and accumulate and spend riches. The rich are not rich or prosperous because only of their righteousness, nor the poor because only of their wickedness, but because the business of acquiring wealth, even as a gift, demands of us certain social and economic qualities, which if we obey or disobey, produce certain results. This is endorsed by Jesus, who gave a luminous exposition of it in the parable of the 5 talents, when he emphasized the law of thrift and work. No one denies that justice, kindness, fairness, fair dealing, right thinking are a part of the business of becoming prosperous, but one may be all of this, and if trusting only in God, and seldom or never working to be prosperous, expecting prosperity to come miraculously as a result of his trust, he will remain where he is the rest of his natural life. Not a few imagine that righteousness is a sort of hocus pocus or magic by which one is favored and blessed and another dishonored and afflicted, as it is with the seed before and after it is put into the good soil. So is it with our ideals, desires, and thoughts. God helps us through conditions. He helps those who help themselves. And no sophistry is more heretical of truth, more insidious and deadly in our lives, than the assumption that God is a respecter of persons and not a respecter of the divine law, that he can and does favor one class who disobey the law in practice and disfavors another class who obey it in theory only. Mere affirmations, vain repetitions, ecstatic phrasing of texts which are not put into practice, they count for nothing. The secret doctrine, first of all, establishes the reign of law on all planes of life, and our attainments and obtainments result from strict compliance with spiritual and scientific conditions established by that law. The natural man receiveth not the things which are in the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him. Neither can he know them, for they are spiritually discerned. Indeed, such is the relationship between causes and effects, and their resultant causes and effects, that the law of justice is not mocked, each soul reaping whatever it sows, not in the sense of rewards or punishments, but only in the deeper sense of spiritual and natural consequences. The Christ psychology begins with the divine and ends with the human order of will, intelligence, feeling, and life. God's will is expressed in the universe as law, not caprice, order, not chaos, intelligence, not chance or accidents, love, not hate, life, and not death. And the use we make of our willing, thinking, and feeling, as each one wills, thinks, and feels, is registered in the character of his life. Thus the law not only governs and finds its supreme justification in one's divinity, whence it originates, but in humanity, not only in the spiritual, but in the natural world as well. For our divinity is in our humanity, and the character of humanity is a negative or positive result of the expression of our divinity. It is the same law governing the divine and the natural man in the spiritual and natural world. The Christ psychology, which differs in name only from the new psychology, hypothetical divinity as the fundamental key to the solution of the problems of man's life. It builds its technique on spiritual facts and knowledge. It proves its preposition by supersensuous or spiritual evidences. These evidences to the natural man, who is not yet enlightened or initiated into spiritual mysteries, are foolishness to him. But facts are stubborn things and persist until properly tabulated in the category of spiritual realities. The mystical and scientific connection between humanity and divinity is established by the new and Christ psychology. Christ is the word employed to express psychological facts and processes which prove the soul to be potentially immortal and divine. Supernormalism defines the scientific, psychic operations, faculties, and results when one functions on the subjective or spiritual side of his nature. But only when such functioning is dedicated to divine and unselfish ends can it be qualified as the application of the philosophy of the Christ psychology. Supernormal psychology is fully and exhaustively explained in the work by the author on the new psychology, and one should study and master it to get an intelligent conception of the scope of this branch of the Christ psychology, as it explains spiritual facts which transcend the power of the normal senses and faculties to apprehend or explain. While these facts can be detached from the physical causes and laws, they are nonetheless associated with them by causes which govern and interpenetrate them, as the ether and fourth dimension interpenetrate matter and its three dimensions in time and in space. What is needed by the soul is the mystical vision, which centralized within the soul, where the Spirit of God and our spirit become, as it were, fused into one and the same life and consciousness reveals the unmistakable difference between the objective power and life of man and the same power and life when governed by and proceeding from his own divinity. The secret doctrine affords a near vision and realization of the essential self, one's divinity, mystically uniting the soul to God, the supreme and absolute intelligence, where what is lawfully fixed is matter in time and space, but lawfully free in spirit. Self can be transformed and made to manifest the higher, more sublime uses of the divine will and power, coordinating with the lower mental faculties and powers to reveal the occult and divine ends which the physical and chemical laws of matter subserve. This explains how the alleged miracles and supernaturalism of the Bible are not suspensions of natural law, nor violations of divine principles, but the clear and undeniable evidences of law under the soul's own divine sovereignty. Such mystical communion between one's higher self, ego is the personal I, divinity is the divine I, or self-universal as entity individualized and potential in all souls. The personality is the ego objectified in the natural man, or subjectified in the spiritual man. The personal ego depends upon the divine I for its existence. Divinity and God concerns the ego or self in the divine life, in the superconsciousness rather than in one's use of supernormal powers on the normal or supernormal plane. Mystical experiences must be and are universal and unique. Many have joined them, especially prophets, mystics, philosophers, poets, avatars, great teachers. These experiences are called religious because they concern the divine life and God, but they should never be confused with merely supernormal experiences. While they are most useful and inevitable in the attainment of spiritual realizations, they are not directly and integrally of the impersonal Spirit of God, consciousness. Such experiences are individual and concrete inasmuch as they relate both to divine guidance and human needs, but they are distinctly mystical, as was the vision of the Christ to Paul while he was on the road to Damascus. Singular as such experiences are, They are of the universal spirit, and whether in form of a vision or voice, they enter the soul only when the soul is either ecstatically in communion with God, or, as in the case of Paul, when the time has come for the soul to end its futile search after truth, and so to react its life from the standpoint of divine conviction and mental illumination, as to enter joyfully, freely into the larger messianic and apostolic service. The meteor as well as the sun roll on orbits concentric with the ellipse, where the light and darkness part company forever. He would find himself must move toward the center where God is, and where the two wills, human and divine, unite and fuse at last into one. It is supremely important that if one is of the order of Melchizedek, that he think, love, and working in the outer court of the Gentiles, as he serves in the Holy of Holies. One light, that of divinity, burns in singular purity in whatever he does and wherever he is. It is not astonishing, therefore, that the word mystery and mysticism should be derived from the same root. He who incredulously and blindly permits the ego to function on only the sensuous, objective plane of consciousness, ignorantly inhibiting the soul's interior, larger and deeper expression of life and power in the sphere of its super-sensuous, transcendent, subjective, and subliminal consciousness, of course, will deny the reality of spiritual and mystical experiences. But the moment the ego is disenthralled from the senses and liberated from the self-imposed obsession of its desires, and these very desires are destroyed, then the ego is free, as was Paul, to enjoy consciously the reveries, ecstasies, visions, voices of his soul, of angels and ministering spirits, as sent of God, and as a part of the order of his divinity and his destiny. To seal the lips, close the eyes and ears, it is the first condition in concentration, which concerns the center of being and divinity, and not only one particular subject or object of consciousness in life. Such centralization of thought, first and then of the ego, releases the soul from bondage to sense attachments, mental habits of reaction, and nervo-psychic automatisms, and fortifies it against similar sensuous temptations. A divine feeling, divine love, and thinking truth, and being God transforms the nature of the soul, and so, by its divinity, it is in the earth, but not of it. It is living the normal life as master under the Christ principle, and not as the obsessed, controlled slave of the carnal mind and life. To this end, the Christ psychology leads, and as it leads the soul, the mystic union between man and God is then established.